Good morning, my dear students, grade 7. This is Mr. Gamal with a new lesson of culture. To continue our work of last time, culture, about Vietnam, this is a new lesson, Chinese rule in Vietnam. As I told you before, China and Vietnam are very related countries. They are neighbors, and China all the time of history, they have some ambitions and desires to control Vietnam, all right? And I told you before how China controlled Vietnam at certain time and how Vietnamese themselves resisted this rule and they freed themselves and took their independence. Now this is a new lesson, a new part of history of how the Chinese ruled Vietnam and how they affected the Vietnamese themselves and their lifestyles, ideologies, way of thinking, and religions and beliefs. We'll read together, and through our reading, we'll get you explanation of what can be confusing for you. Chinese rule in Vietnam. By the way, this is page 358 in the book. 358 in the book. If you don't have the book, no problem. You can depend on this sheet or this lesson audio and with this visual sheet. All right, under Chinese rule, the early people of Vietnam learned many new ideas about the arts, technology, and governing. The Vietnamese used the Chinese innovations in irrigation to grow more rice in the Red River Delta. All right, as I told you, China and Vietnam civilizations were formed on which area? The Red River Delta. This is the name of the river, like in Egypt, the Nile River. All right? And the Chinese affected the Vietnamese through their innovations. All right? You know innovations? Like inventions, new ways. All right? They invented or made up. Innovation like what? Irrigation giving or providing lands by water so as to plant and to grow crops, to grow more rice. Rice, this is very important in that part of the world. Rice for Chinese and Vietnamese, very important staple food, a very important part of food. All right? So they learned irrigation from the Chinese. This is one. Let's continue. They also began to use Chinese farming tools, all right, such as iron plows, and to harness animals to pull them. This is other two things they learned from the Chinese. Using the farming tools, all right. These are tools the farmers use to dig the land, to carry water from river to the land, to help them or to make their work easier, such as iron plows. And also they learn to harness animals. You know harness? Like control animals, donkeys and horses and cows and so, by putting some piece of rope around their necks to pull them. All right? In addition to introducing new ideas, the Chinese built waterways and roads across the Vietnamese lands that they ruled. This is something important that Chinese did to Vietnam. During the rule, they built waterways, all right, like canals, small rivers, streams, and so on, and they built roads across the Vietnamese land to make movement easier. All right, these projects improved transportation and communication, and also helped the Chinese keep control over the Vietnamese people. Yes, so they served two ways. They served the Vietnamese and Chinese together in transportation, carrying things and moving from place to another on these easy-made routes. And also they helped the Chinese to control the Vietnamese people through their quick movement to crush any resistance or to stop any work against the Chinese. All right. At first, the Chinese allowed local rulers to take part in governing. When the Chinese start ruling the country, they allowed local rulers from the Vietnamese to rule or to help them in governing Vietnamese lands. However, by the 1st century AD, all right, after Christ, after birth of Christ, 1st century around 100 or before this, the Han dynasty wanted to control the waterways of the lands. Han dynasty, this is a very important Chinese dynasty, Chinese kings. They were called the Han dynasty. They wanted to control the waterways of Vietnam. Ports along the coast were valuable for trade with other countries. So China began to make its rule over the Vietnamese stronger. Yes, this is the Han dynasty. They tried to control the ports, all right, on the sea or so as to help them make the rule stronger and help them trade well with other countries. To strengthen its rule, China began forcing the Vietnamese people to follow Chinese customs. This is a very important point. When the Chinese wanted to make the Vietnamese like them or related to them, make them forget that they are strangers or occupiers or forceful persons, all right? They wanted the Chinese people, the Vietnamese people, to follow Chinese customs, beliefs, customs, religions, and way of thinking, and so on. Festivals, celebrations, they make the Vietnamese act like them. This way, the Vietnamese will feel they are like Chinese. Nothing of hatred between them or of feeling they are under them or below their level, and so on. This is a very good idea. The Vietnamese had to study the teachings of the Chinese philosopher Confucius, all right? Wear Chinese clothing, speak Chinese language. These are items of customs and beliefs. They made the Vietnamese follow Confucius rules or teachings. Confucius, this is a very important belief among the Chinese till now, all right? They nearly worshipped Confucius, all right? And he has some teachings like words of wisdom and so the Chinese like him. It is like a belief, okay? So they made the Vietnamese follow the same way of belief or thinking and wear Chinese clothing and speak Chinese language. So they cannot, over time, or they wouldn't feel strange or different from the Chinese. So they won't resist them or stand against them, and they will accept them in their lands as rulers or citizens. Anyway, the Vietnamese, however, refused to give up their language. This is the very conspicuous point, or the very strange point of what happened. What happened? That Vietnamese resisted all this. They didn't accept this. They refused to give up their language. They didn't like Chinese language. The more firmly the Chinese insisted, the more strongly the Vietnamese resisted. And so on. The Chinese wanted to control them by any way, any means, whether easy way or hard way, by force or by carrot. The Vietnamese refused, and they insisted on their own way of life and own way of speaking their language. In AD 440, the Vietnamese defeated the Chinese army. This happened. It was like a fight between the Chinese and the Vietnamese, and it happened that the Vietnamese defeated the Chinese army. They then formed a new Vietnamese kingdom, but Vietnamese rule did not last long. So they formed a kingdom of their own. But the Chinese army took back control in 443 AD. So they enjoyed their freedom only for 3 years, and the Chinese came back with more forceful power, all right, to control the Vietnamese. All right, this is our lesson for today, and this is the homework lesson. You can write the answer and send it on the LMS. It is due after tomorrow. You can send it after, or say Thursday or Sunday. I can accept it till Sunday. All right. The question is, under Chinese rule, how did the Vietnamese culture change? How did the Vietnamese culture change? This is to study this again, or listen to this again, and try to figure this out. How Chinese rule, how the Vietnamese culture changed under Chinese rule. You know, culture, way of life. Culture means a way of life. In other words, I can say how the Vietnamese way of life changed under Chinese rule, or how the Chinese affected the way of life of the Vietnamese. All right, you can pick it from this page. All right, send the answer in the LMS in your handwriting, your own handwriting. All right, thank you. See you again. Goodbye.